Geelong's Brad Close has avoided a second suspension for this year for this dangerous tackle after the match review officer determined that his tackle on Sydney's Aaron Francis was not careless. It was the view of the MRO that despite having Francis in a vulnerable position, Close attempted to slow momentum in taking him to ground, and that in the circumstances he was not careless in tackling in that manner. No further action was taken. Good to see that this one resulted in no fine and no suspension here. I think it was pretty much the perfect sort of tackle. He probably should have been paid the free kick in my opinion for incorrect disposal, but overall very happy to see that this is no suspension, no fine. This is a good tackle. Francis had the chance to get rid of the ball, he did not, and therefore Close is free to play next week. Cody Waitman from the Western Bulldogs has been hit with a misconduct charge against Brennan Cox from Fremantle in the second quarter of their game. This is a fixed financial sanction of $1,500, and with an early plea this can be downgraded to $1,000. As you can see, Cody sort of pushes Brennan Cox a little bit towards the boundary line. I wouldn't have thought that this was worth a fine. I don't even think it's really worth a free kick. What do you think about this one? I think a $1,000 fine is a little bit rough for nothing really that sinister. As Cody Waitman's reputation cost him a little bit of money here. What do you think? Interesting to see here that Willem Drew and Hobbs both didn't receive a fine or any sort of please explain after they made contact with the umpire here. You can see they're sort of wrestling and they do make contact with the umpire. Typically this results in a fine. As we saw last week, Tim Kelly actually made contact with the umpire, which was very unintentional, but it's actually classed as careless contact with an umpire, and I think it was a $3,000 fine with an early plea downgraded to $2,000. Something along those lines, which seems pretty unfair to Tim Kelly, but then these two get absolutely nothing this week. What do you think about that? Of course, the AFL's love child, Patrick Dangerfield, receives absolutely no fine, suspension or even a please explain for this elbow to the head of Callum Mills. Now I know that might be a bit extreme, me calling him the love child, but Dangerfield seems to get away with a little bit more than the average player. If this was someone else who was recently suspended like Broad from Richmond, he would probably be out for at least a week, I would assume. Not sure how he didn't even cop a fine for this, as he clearly leads with the elbows and hits Callum Mills in the head. This should be a fine at the very least. Yet again, the consistency is all over the place and this just makes no sense to me. What do you think? Should Dangerfield got a fine or a suspension for this? Surely the MRO took a closer look at this one, as Sam Powell-Pepper absolutely cleans up Zerk Thatcher. From the first angle, it looks like Powell-Pepper makes a clean hit on the shoulder and just drops Zerk Thatcher. But from the other one, it almost looks like his elbow does make contact with the head. I'm sure they did go back and watch this one. Nothing came of this, so I'm assuming that he didn't make contact with the head, otherwise it would probably be a fine at the very least, possibly a suspension. But Sam Powell-Pepper is free to play. This one's a little bit hard to see, so I'm not sure if the AFL had access to a different sort of camera angle here, but you can see Jimmy Webster after a tackle leads with the elbow and looks like he hits Luke Shuey in the head. I would have thought the MRO would have liked to see this one. I don't know if there was any sort of report or not, but it looks like he does make contact, so not sure why this wasn't anything. This one goes unlooked at, and I guess it's just play on. What do you think? What should have this been? Probably a fine might be appropriate for this one, as the play has stopped, so there's no need for this. Probably a fine. This one's a little interesting to me. As you can see, Callum Coleman-Jones actually gives away a free kick and a 50-metre penalty for this hard hit. Josh Worrell actually comes in to remonstrate for his teammate, and he is actually fined for engaging in a melee wrestling. This is a fixed financial sanction of $1,500 with an early plea can be downgraded to $1,000. I think this play from Coleman Jones is pretty dirty. Yes, I am a Crows supporter, but I think that's totally unnecessary, and for him to only cop a 50-metre penalty but then have your teammate come over and stick up for you and he's the one who cops the fine, that seems a little unfair to me. What do you think? Should this even be a fine? Or should Coleman Jones receive a fine for this? Brisbane forward Lincoln McCarthy has been banned for one game for striking Richmond's Camden McIntosh during the Lions' win over the Tigers on Thursday night. As you can see, McCarthy and McIntosh engage in a scuffle after a marking contest where McCarthy has hit McIntosh high. The match review officer assessed the contact as intentional conduct, low impact and high contact, which results in a one-game suspension. This is a pretty textbook jumper punch and it's going to cost him 1 week. McDonald has tackled Henry and the umpire classed this as a dangerous tackle, which, looking at it, it probably is correct. It does look a little bit dangerous. The MRO didn't look at this one as there was no need to. Looks like Henry does contribute to the tackle to make it look a bit more dangerous than it probably was. Nothing to see here. Both are free to play next week. Campbell Chesser from West Coast, Bailey Williams from West Coast, Luke Shuey from West Coast, Ruben Jinby from West Coast, Mitch Owens from St Kilda and Rowan Marshall from St Kilda have all been charged with engaging in melee wrestling, which is their first offence, in the second quarter of their match on Sunday. This is a fixed financial sanction, which is $1,500 and can be downgraded with an early plea to $1,000. Mitch Duncan has absolutely cleaned up Nick Blakey here. This wasn't looked at by the MRO. It looks like a clean bump. It's just very hard. I think this is fair. Nothing more to see here. Free to play next week. A matchday report was laid against Carlton's Jacob Wiedering for contact to Hawthorn's Lloyd Meek in the third quarter of the Sunday match. This was assessed by the MRO, and after examining all available evidence, it was the view of the MRO that whilst Wiedering does make contact with his left hand to Meek, any high contact that was made was negligible. No further action was taken. Now I thought the head was absolutely sacrosanct, as they always say. I thought any sort of head-high contact was at least worth a week, so why was this one not? McCarthy's punch was worth a week, but Wiedering's open hand to the face is not worth a week. So are the MRO saying that you can do it if it's an open hand but not a closed fist? This is very confusing. What do you think? After Collingwood kicked a goal in the second quarter, Noah Anderson and Mitchell met together and there was a fair bit of pushing and shoving, which ended up as a melee wrestling event, and Noah Anderson was charged with engaging in a melee wrestling, which is a fixed financial sanction, and as you know, this is a $1,500 sanction which can be downgraded to $1,000 with an early plea. While this was off camera, it's a little hard to see who started it, but I'm sure the AFL have another angle which they supplied, and Noah Anderson was the only one who was charged for this little wrestling event here. Taylor Walker from the Crows has been hit with a rough conduct charge for his bump on Taron Thomas in the third quarter of the Saturday game. This was classed as intentional conduct, low impact and body contact. For this, Taylor Walker has received a $3,000 sanction, which can be downgraded to $2,000 with an early plea. As you can see here, it happens slightly down at the bottom of the camera. I'll try my best to focus it, but it's a bump after he disposes of the ball, and I guess due to the severity of the bump, this is worth a $3,000 fine. Usually this is worth a 50-metre penalty, so not sure why this is a fine. Do you agree that the severity is the reason why this was a $3,000 fine? I'm a little bit confused by this one. Let me know what you think. Jared Witts has also been given a rough conduct charge, the same as Taylor Walker, for hitting Taylor Adams in the third quarter against Collingwood on Saturday. The MRO graded this as careless conduct, low impact and high contact. Again, this was a $3,000 sanction with an early plea, can be downgraded to $2,000. As the bump was off the ball, this has been given a fine, so I'm not sure why they're giving this a fine when it should be a free kick. I don't know. Do you think the severity is bad enough to be warranting a fine for this? I'm not entirely sure about that. Let me know what you think about these longer format videos for the suspension, a little bit more discussion. Thank you for watching. If you're new, please do subscribe and like the video. I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.